Thanks, Chair. I've just got some follow-up questions on the cost of the deployment into Iraq. How much has been spent so far on the latest iteration of our involvement in Iraq, so maybe starting from 1 June of this year?
I think we might have to take that on notice, Senator, because we don't as yet have that data.
We don't know how much we've spent?
Well, not until we sit down and work out at what beginning and end point we want to analyse. We will, for MyEFO, we will have some data, but given that we don't have an accurate a period of time that we will be conducting this operation, we haven't, to this point in time, I don't believe, and I stand to be corrected, have a running tally that we can give you. But ultimately, those numbers will be very transparently disclosed in MyEFO and the budget.
What's the estimated cost of keeping a force in the field such as we have thus far? So just the average monthly estimated cost of the Air Force deployment, the SAS deployment and those who surround them?
Well, again, we'd need to take that on notice because we don't actually have a configuration, a regular configuration such as we now have in Iraq, that we can draw upon for information. So we'll collate that on notice for you and tell you what we think the average representative cost fairly is, but it will take some time for us to put all that together.
Just to be clear then, I've asked for two separate things there. One is what has been expended thus far. I picked the starting date of 1 June. If you want to pick a different starting date, that's all right. And then the second is the average ongoing monthly costs. I'm a bit surprised that you're not even able to provide us with order of magnitude estimates though, Minister.
Well, because we're at a very early stage and we haven't actually deployed fully. We've been running now for about 3 or 4 weeks in various iterations. So we started off with heavy lift aircraft, then we've deployed the tanker, the E7 and the fighter aircraft. It'll take some time for those costs to filter through, but bear in mind, we would have been training with many of these assets in any event. The wages and salaries of the personnel would have had to be paid in any event, so there's an allowance issue that goes on top of this. We'll put that together on notice for you and give you what we believe is as accurate a representation of the cost to date and the average monthly costs as we can.
Minister, have you discussed the costs with the department? You must have some idea.
We have, and the normal course of events arising from Afghanistan, of course, is on a no-win, no-loss basis. We've been in close discussions with Treasury, and all of these matters are under consideration in the budget process, in the MyEFO process, and so what I'll do is we'll do our best to give you the answers arising from those processes going forward. But bear in mind, we haven't really committed to the full extent that we are going to just yet. So there's warlike service allowances, there's a whole host of other things that are going to come into play in the future, so that the costs have not yet stabilised.
What does no win, no loss mean in the context of a deployment such as this one? The
costs of the operation will be funded separately to the defence budget.
Yeah, so it's over and above what it would have cost.
Over and above.
Yeah, okay. Have estimated costs been provided to you by the department? You must have at least asked.
I have asked, but broadly it has always been too premature to put an accurate, useful handle on what we're doing, because we're still have not, as I say, stabilised those costs on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
I recognise that what might be going on in the background and what you might be prepared to provide to an estimates committee are two different things, but I'm still trying to get my handle on the process, because I don't think you're telling me that you have no idea. I think there must be estimates floating around.
Well, look, I don't want to give you any estimate because we haven't got a time frame upon which to gauge and to benchmark the operation. Now, these matters, and what I've said, and acknowledge they are very important matters for the Parliament and for this committee. We will come forward with an accurate assessment, or as accurate assessment as we can, once those costs have stabilised and we know what they're running at. But we're a little way from that now.
Minister, when did you first ask for an estimated cost of the deployment of the scale that's undertaken?
I haven't asked for an estimated cost. What I've said is let's go forward with a submission with respect to a no-win, no-loss submission, and I've been given to understand that is potentially the way we'll deal with these costs.
So there's obviously quite substantial costs involved in projecting capability like this overseas as opposed to them training at home.
Well, not necessarily. The main cost for us here is the cost of ordnance and the cost of fuel.
And the additional pay for those who are...
There is an element there, but as I say, that has not stabilised and we don't have an idea of what that is. There's also supplies, deployment supplies, the logistics of maintaining the general provisions for our people in the Middle East. We've added 600 personnel to the Middle East, so there's the associated costs for that. But as I say, these people would have been paid in any event, and the platforms would have been exercising and burning fuel in any event. There's a depreciation, of course, but again, that would have occurred probably in exercises as we conduct them on a monthly, annual basis.
So by MyEFO, I don't know quite what undertaking you've made to me here, you'll be able to provide us with an estimate of what it's costing over and above what it would have cost if we had not.
Well, we're going to go away and answer those particular two questions for you, put the data together as best we can. We will caveat what we are uncertain about because, as I say, to underline it again, the costs have not stabilised. So there's an establishment cost, there's an ongoing daily cost, and then there'll be some other costs in terms of allowances, as I've mentioned, and the department will give me all of the necessary facts to give you proper answers on the two questions you've raised.
Minister, that sounds sensible, but did none of your cabinet colleagues think to ask you how much a deployment of this scale would cost?
Well, that's a very good question. Let me tell you that for MH370 we deployed 200 people to Pierce Air Base and 4 P3 Orions out into the middle of the Indian Ocean. Those costs were absorbed by the department. We deployed about 200 people to Western and Eastern Europe for MH17. Those costs were also absorbed by the department. So on humanitarian and disaster relief, we reconfigure the budget, and if you'd like to discuss this with Mr Pryor, he'll take you through how we go about the process of absorbing and dealing with and reprioritising issues so that we can meet contingencies. Now, the readiness and the capacity to meet contingencies is something that the taxpayer and the parliament gets when they put money on the table in the budgetary basis that they do every year in May.
So we've got estimates that have come from Dr Thompson from ASPI that you're no doubt aware of, and you've got Prime Minister's estimate, which I don't think anybody's holding him to because the numbers are quite diverse. The Prime Minister's estimate from 16 September was about $250 million every 6 months, which is in excess, I think, of what ASPI estimated. Are those estimates at least in the ballpark? And
well, of course, I'd agree with what the Prime Minister's saying as being in the ballpark, but I'm sure you don't want just ballpark figures. You want as accurate figures as we can provide. That's what I've undertaken to give you.
No, I understand that, and I thank you. I just wonder on what basis the Prime Minister was able to make that estimate if you're not able to provide us with some kind of disaggregated figure today.
Well, I'm just not sure on the basis of that, but you know, I'm sure he had a proper basis to make that.
You're the Minister for Defence.
Yeah, sure.
Do you not talk about these things?
No, I don't talk about speculative amounts. I talk about actual amounts, and I talk about amounts that are going to be known to me in expenses that are stabilised over a period. Now, you know, 1 month in this operation will be quite expensive. The next month will be less expensive. I've explained to you where the costs lie in this operation. They vary from day to day, month to month.
Okay. Is it possible to provide some order of magnitude figures during this estimate session, even if you don't have them with you at the table today?
Well, let's go with the Prime Minister's estimate. I'm happy to do that.
So, how did Mr Abbott arrive at that estimate? I don't know. You don't know?
No. He's made an estimate. He's obviously either had a discussion with someone inside Defence. He has information that he has obtained himself. I don't know what that information is, but I'm led to believe that the costs for Defence will be on a no-win, no-loss basis. That's why I haven't concerned myself greatly with that detail.
So he just comes up with a number and you haven't thought to validate it?
I don't know what he's done, but I'm sure he has made appropriate and prudent inquiries as to the cost. There has been discussions as to cost. I'm waiting to provide factual information to you on the questions you've asked as best we can, because as I've said to you, on several occasions now, those costs have not stabilised. But as soon as they have, and I'll provide you with whatever information I can provide to you as to the ongoing nature of the costs of this operation on a monthly basis, and also the costs from 1 June to the particular date of the answer of the question.
It's remarkable, but I thank you for taking that material on notice. I want to follow up something that Senator...
Before you go on, if
I
I
could
ask
go ahead.
for it to be your last question, Senator Ludlam, can I just welcome the Chief of the Defence Force, Air Chief Marshal Binskin, and also Mr Richardson. Thank you very much for your attendance. Senator Ludlam, would you...
Thanks, Chair. Just to conclude on Iraq, Senator Conroy made some queries earlier about the status of forces agreement that has been signed or perhaps not yet signed with the Iraqi authorities. I just wonder whether there is any...
We're not using the expression status of forces, we're using the expression arrangement, suitable arrangement to provide the necessary protections for our people in Iraq.
Why, apologies if I missed the earlier exchange, but why is this not a status of forces agreement?
Because it's just not. It's not...
You have to do a little bit better than that.
It's not in line with what a status of forces agreement was in Afghanistan. It's not the same as that.
Okay. So what is it exactly? And
it's an arrangement that DFAT, AGs and Defence have agreed is suitable to provide the necessary protections for our forces in Iraq.
If their presence there is contested, how would an agreement that is secret and that the Iraqi government has asked us to never put into the public domain be used to protect Australian service personnel if it can't actually be made public? Well, how is this document to be used if no one can see it?
Well, it's not about whether someone sees it for it to be effective. It's about whether we have the appropriate legal advice, we have the appropriate understanding from a defence perspective that what has been agreed is adequate to provide the necessary protection. And I've said to you, we are very happy with what has been agreed.
Are you happy with the fact that it can't be disclosed?
Yes.
You think that's fine?
Very much so in the circumstances of the new government in Baghdad and the fact that we have special forces that are going onto an advise and assist role. I'm very happy with what we've got.
I'll ask you about them when we have Chief of Army up shortly, but what reasons were you given? Is it partly that the Australian presence there is contested even within people who would ostensibly be our allies?
I'm sorry, what do you mean? What reasons?
Well, reports in recent days of quite senior Shiite, I don't know if you'd call them officials, it's probably not quite right, but certainly figures in control of militants in the area who don't want Australians there. Is that part of the reason why we can't disclose the agreement?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
So what reasons were you given for that agreement not being put into the public domain?
As a courtesy to the country that has invited us to provide advice and assistance, we have agreed that the basis upon which we will go forward shall remain confidential.
So we don't know what it covers?
Well, I do. But as a courtesy to Iraq and out of respect for them, we have agreed to have the precise nature of the arrangement remain confidential.